Thank you, Dale. You thought you just told a joke or something. They were so excited. Yeah, well, I mentioned this earlier too when Dale was singing that. It also just reminded me of the power of community, right? Like, help is on the way. We get to be God's help in each other's lives. And so we wanted to take a moment to thank the facilitators of our latest Spirit Groups program. Some of you may know that for the last about 2 months or so, we had small in-home study groups, I think all of them virtual this time around, where individuals were discussing and leaning on each other as they went through the pages of Build the Life You Want, the book by Arthur Brooks and Oprah. And just wanted to honor the facilitators for creating the space of community, of connection, of God's help in that. And so thank you to Jenny's, to Kevin, to Marla, to Eddie, to Evie, to Liseth, to Xenia, to Noel, and to Deanna. So thank you all for that. Let's just give them a round of gratitude. Thank you to all those that participated in the program, and they are all inviting all of us, so whether you were part of Spirit Groups or not this time around, we're all invited after the service I love it. When I left from my vacation, it was called the cafeteria. I come back a few weeks later, it's the youth lounge. So you're all invited through those doors after the service into our youth lounge, where they're going to have a wrap-up celebration after the service. They're going to be painting some spirit rocks so that you can pass them around to the community and inspire others. And it's just going to be a festive time of celebration. So make sure you go to the youth lounge after the services. So I'm going to do it. A man sees a sign in front of a house. This is what happens. I should not be allowed to go around the room saying hello to people because I had made the decision not to tell this joke between the 9 and the 11 o'clock service. And 2 people on that side, I won't point them out just yet, but they said they wanted jokes, so it's on them. A man sees a sign outside of a front of a house that says, "Talking dog for sale." And so curious, he rings the bell and he goes to the owner, and the owner takes him to the backyard, and the man walks out there and looks at the dog and says to the dog, "Can you talk?" And the dog looks back and says, "Yup." He's like, "Well, so what's your story?" And the dog looks up and says, "Well, I discovered I could speak when I was pretty young, and so then I worked at the CIA, I traveled the world, I even catch a couple of spies, and now I'm retired here." And the man is just amazed, and he looks over at the owner and says, "Well, how much do you want for this dog?" And the guy says, $10, give me $10. $10? $10? Why so cheap? And the owner replies, "Because that dog's a liar. He didn't do any of that stuff." It actually did better this time around. Help is on the way. All right. Well, but one of the things that caught my attention when I found that joke is that, it was all about the details of the CIA work and everything. And it's like, wait a minute, just take a step back. You just had an experience of talking to a dog. And sometimes we do get caught up in the thoughts and the beliefs and all of that, and we don't give ourselves the pause to just ask, well, wait, what kind of experience am I having? And I really believe that us allowing ourselves to go into some of our doubts, to go into some of our skepticism, can create a richer experience about our experiences. About our experiences. And it's really interesting to me. I don't know if any of you caught this, but here I am. I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about the power of skepticism and our doubts. And sure enough, I'm so well trained that during the meditation, I said, release your doubts. And actually now I'm saying, hold on, maybe embrace some of them. Be friends with some of the skepticism or the questions that may come out. Really question the questions. Look at what the doubts are bringing up for you. Now, I have to tell you, right, with anything, there is the way that we can use it as a tool, and there's also the shadow of it. So I also invite us to be mindful from what space we're doing it in, right? Are we allowing ourselves to go deeper into the questions, deeper into the doubt and the skepticism from a place of really wanting to get clear, right? Really wanting to experience more of God in our lives? Or are we doing it to prove ourselves right and prove everybody else wrong, right? Or in some cases, prove everybody right and prove ourselves wrong, right? And so there's an invitation for discernment in this process, and there is power in the questions. There is power in allowing ourselves to be skeptics. And in many ways, what we're inviting ourselves into is redefining the power of skepticism within our own spiritual journey and a religious life. Many times, how many of you have been there and done that, where you're not allowed to question religion? You're not allowed to question the beliefs that are being passed down or try to be passed down to you, right? And so there is a level of maybe hesitation or of judging questions and doubts that may remain from those spaces. I'm the father of an 11-year-old, and I wish I had enough foresight in certain moments to not say because I told you so. Don't question it because I told you so. Don't ask the why because I told you so. That's the why, right? That's the why. And as conscious as I want to be, it sometimes comes up because it's just part of how maybe I have moved through life, and maybe I haven't questioned that enough, right? To be able to do it in a different way. It just come up for me in the last couple of months since my son is growing up and is now 11. It's the same things that I don't want to see in him right now are the things that I love to see when he's an adult, right? Question authority, question what you're told, and seek out what is true for you, except if I tell you so, right? How many of you are like that? Yeah, come on. I'm a little skeptical that only one hand went up. How many people consider yourselves skeptics in here? A good number of you. I have to tell you, for the most part, I think all of us have some level of skepticism within us. I think that many of us found ourselves in unity as a result of being skeptical. Not many of us had the luxury or the blessing of growing up in unity, right? And so for many of us, it's sort of another spiritual community that we found in our own spiritual journey. Deepak Chopra, a friend of unity, says, skepticism is the first step towards truth. See, skepticism is not the absence of faith. It can be the beginning of a deeper faith journey. Doubt doesn't have to be the opposite of faith. It can be an essential part of us recognizing a deeper truth and a deeper understanding of who and what we are, who we are in relationship to the divine, and how that is showing up into our lives and into the world. And in unity, I have to tell you, we believe in a God that is bigger than our questions. We believe in a God that is bigger than our doubts. God's going to be okay if you have some doubts. God's going to be okay if you question certain things, because God is the allness of life. God is the allness of wisdom and power. God has some time for us to get to that place, right? If we can see it in that light, maybe. Because actually, I believe that God is that impulse for us to spiritually evolve. Get that? I believe, when we question, when we doubt, and when we do some healthy work through that, I believe that that is part of the ways in which God is that evolutionary impulse that is bringing us into a greater awareness and a greater experience of truth. And in a world that is filled with blind faith, and how many of us have looked at the TV screen? How many of us have been there where you see wait a minute, why don't they question that, right? Why do they just believe that? Well, I ask myself sometimes, why did I not question that? Why did I just believe that, right? And so it's happening, and there's a level of desire from the outside world for there just to be blind faith, and unity has a radical invitation, which is to question it. Whatever you hear from us, whatever you hear in our classes, question it. See if it rings true for you. And if it doesn't, then look for something that does. If it does, go deeper into it. If it doesn't, Is there a different perspective that you can bring to it for the richness of the evolution that is taking place? And I believe that it is through our questioning that a lot of things go from being theory to practice. So I've been thinking about that, right? Like at convention last week, somebody mentioned something that was going on, and of course, I was like, oh, I'd never react that way. And I stopped myself and I said, actually, I have a theory that I won't react that way because I haven't been there. And I hope that it's going to be my practice, right? And so being able to question the thought and question the beliefs that we have in the moments where those things come up and the judgments come up is a very powerful tool. And then being skeptics or allowing ourselves to go deeper into some of the doubts that we may have, even about our own spiritual understanding, can bring about a greater truth. Because there's something that maybe doesn't sit well with us, right? And before we judge it, before we push it to the side, can we befriend it? And can we ask, well, what's the judgment coming from? Is the judgment or the doubt coming from a place of, this doesn't feel true to me and there's something different, or I would see it a different way? Or is it, oh, there's something I gotta heal because it feels true, but the mind won't let me live into that truth. The judgments, the doubts won't let me. And so it's always an invitation to go deeper and deeper. And I really believe that a spiritual journey is not necessarily about just finding the right answers. It's about the journey. I can be very minded about the end result, right? Like in the end result, heaven on earth, knowing that God is good all the time, and all the time God is good, and the journey and the richness of the questions and the things that we have to move through and the experiences that we have to move to get into those spaces, that's where the beauty can lie. That's where the grace can be felt more fully. And so challenging to faith, I believe, more than doubt, is false certainty. Have you ever been in those spaces where you thought you knew something, you didn't question it, like doubts would come up, but you're like, no, God is good all the time, God is good all the time. And then all of a sudden, like something gets like taken off from under you, right? And it just doesn't feel good. And so there may be a lack of, there's a place for false certainty. And the more that we can go into some of the questions and doubts, that false certainty can become something that we can really anchor ourselves in. And so how are we doing that? And how are we allowing ourselves to move into those spaces? One of the things that I believe about this journey of faith is that it isn't about having certainty. It's more about trusting the process that we are moving through, trusting the process of unfoldment. Now, like I said, many of us questioned what we were told in the past. So I believe that there is that level of skepticism. And look where skepticism got us. It got us to this very room, right? It got us to a place of, wait a minute, maybe I'm not separate from God. Maybe I'm one with God. Maybe God is fully love and the expression of love in its many varied ways. And so it got us to this place. Some of us, when we questioned, were probably quickly told, don't question it, be quiet, and just go away. But many of us maybe also just didn't like the answers that we received, but only because we were asking the questions. Now, we're also here in Unity and Unity in the Bay because there was a couple who also questioned what they were told. Myrtle Fillmore, a co-founder, was told that she was going to die in a few years, that she was going to be sickly until the moment of her death, and it didn't sit with her. It wasn't her experience of who she was. And so she started questioning it. And so she really went to see a teacher, and she was told that she didn't inherit any sickness, and it felt. If you read her letters, she doesn't say, oh, I knew it was true. She says, it felt like it was true. And she went with the feeling. And then her husband was a skeptic about what was going on with her, so he started to do all the research and starting to learn a lot about what it could have been that created the healing that Myrtle lived through. And so we are here because of skeptics like Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And Myrtle says the time is right for a new understanding of the Christ Spirit, and we in Unity are those who have caught the vision. In order for us to have a new understanding, we've got to question and release the old one. That's the process that it happens. And so what is the process that is seeking to happen through you? Rather than judge your doubts and judge your questions, are there doubts and questions that are going to open you up to the next level or the next step in your conscious evolution of spirituality and bring you to a place of a closer relationship with the truth of your being? Now, there's another story that I want to share with you, and I had my own judgments about this story. How many of you know the story of doubting Thomas? So in the Gospels, there's the Apostle of Thomas, and he, just became the doubting Thomas because he had one particular doubt. There's only one doubt that shows up. But it's just really interesting because that's the way that I had learned that story, I really judged him for doubting. And I really judged the way that the story sort of played out. But this story really is a powerful story reminding us of what can take place and the transformation that can take place when we allow ourselves to doubt and be vulnerable enough to speak those or honor them within us. And so he is remembered for doubting when other apostles came over and said, Jesus has resurrected. Jesus has resurrected. And, doubting Thomas says, I'll see it, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I'm able. He actually says, when I touch the marks of the nails and his side, Jesus' side, that's when I believe it. And I'm thinking to myself, because I'm doubting, right? I'm thinking to myself, like, you were hanging out with Jesus all that time, and you saw those miracles, and then something happens, and then they tell you he's resurrected, and you just doubt? Like, were you really hanging out with him, right? Like, did you really get it, But that was my judgment on doubt that was showing up. Because what ends up happening is that Jesus shows up the next week and says, you know what? Here I am. Touch away. Feel it. And what's really interesting is I read that story many times before, and I always read it as Jesus coming back and saying, like, feel it. Come on, right? Like, feel it. But when I shifted my mind about, like, being okay with the doubts, it was like, wait, no, that was a loving Jesus saying, here you go. You have some doubts. Now experience that which you wanted to experience. Because, see, doubting Thomas just didn't want to take somebody else's word for it. He wanted to have the experience with Jesus. He wanted to see and feel that experience. And so I invite us to look at some of those doubts and questions that come up for us and ask ourselves, wait a minute, are they leading me to recognize more fully the power of just being in the experience? And so when doubts come up, like if I say something or you read something, well, hold on. Is it true? Have I experienced that before? How do I feel with this, right? Like really move deeper and deeper into it to get to the core of the experience that we want to have of God, the experience that we want to have of love. And God can take it. In the story, Jesus didn't get mad. He could take it. You know, our own divinity can take it. And we can really lean on the experience of God that we've had. And so when the thoughts and the beliefs and all of those stuff are being questioned, we can question it without fearing that it can interfere with the fact that we have a relationship, a personal relationship, that we can lean on God. Why? Not because we are told that we can lean on God, but because we've had experiences. How many of you had experiences where you've been able to lean on the power of God? How many of you had experiences where you can lean on the power of love? How many of you have had experiences where people questioned the blessing or people questioned the miracles? You felt the blessing and the miracle. And so the more that we can, like an onion skin, peel away by allowing ourselves those questions and those doubts, the more we'll get to be anchored in the truth that is simply asking to be felt. Not to be known, not to be judged, to be experienced. And that, to me, is the beauty of us allowing us to simply be with that. Now, Charles Fillmore says, let us be skeptics, but let us also look beyond skepticism into the calm trust, which is the final test of all spiritual unfoldments. Let us be the skeptics while also embracing the faith that the journey will guide us, that the process is a process of unfoldment because it has been. Every time we've questioned it, When you questioned the faith of your upbringing, maybe, or when you questioned something that somebody told you about you not being good enough or worthy or sacred, when you've questioned it, have you not felt better? Have you not felt and experienced God more fully when you've moved through that? The evolution that we are seeking requires questions, and it requires ourselves to allow ourselves to experience spiritually that which we may not know just yet. So it is an exciting journey that we can be on. And again, I simply invite you that when those questions or doubts come up, is it true? Is it showing up in my life in this way? How am I experiencing this in this moment? How does this bring me closer to feeling the presence of God here and now? Now, there's different practices that you can do with that, right? Like you can just simply be with that. You can journal. You can call up a friend and talk to a friend about it. Whatever it is, to really engage with the thinking and the process that moves you into the feeling and the knowing of the heart. Yogananda says, in divine friendship, let us seek the truth together, not fearing to question, for in the question lies the seed of deeper understanding. I encourage you to continue a journey of questioning and seeking the truth, both individually and collectively. Next week, we're doing something a little different. We've done it before where we do the Ask the Ministers questions, right? Specifically, we decided to do a talk on skepticism the week before. So if there are things that you're a skeptic about, that you have questions on, bring them with you next Sunday. What we're doing differently, we used to ask you to do it beforehand so that, we could prepare and have all the answers. It's about the experience. And so you're going to be invited on Sunday next week to just simply drop a question that you may have off in a basket, and me and Pam are just going to take it out of the box and just answer about our experience of those questions. Because again, we're not going to be shy about the questions. We're not going to be shy about the doubts. We're going to trust that they are a part of our own growth and our own evolution. How many of you are grateful to be in a spiritual community that tells you you don't have to believe this? You don't have to believe this. You are free to choose what you believe. You are free to go deeper into your experiences and know and trust the God of your being is guiding you in the way that you were meant to be guided, not the way that somebody else thought that you should be or guided. How many are you grateful that you can be in a place of questioning and be okay with the questions, that you can be in a place of doubt and be okay with doubting and be okay knowing that regardless of your questions, regardless of your doubts, regardless of your skepticism, God simply can take it, will take it, and will through that guide us into a greater experience of God, of love, of wisdom, and of heaven on earth. Are you with me? Are you grateful? When we begin to the questions that come up, we open up, and the clouds of worry and the clouds of stress are let go, and we can live into a bright, bright, sunshiny day once again. Thank you, and namaste, and let the questions begin.